It tells you the list of I can't find it, but I'll bring it next week or the following week when we come. I'll bring a list. I'll bring you a list of the tribes that were affected by this apostasy by the in the early time of the judges.
Oh, I have that. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
The Midianites and...
No, I'm talking about the children of Israel.
Oh, I see.
Ephraim, Benjamin, and Issachar,
No.
Zebulun. No.
Here it is, right here. Go back to chapter 1. Notice this. These are now we're gonna read now the ones that have laid off the warfare, the ones that have stopped this warfare against the Canaanites. Notice who they are. Verse 28. And it came to pass when Israel was strong that they put the Canaanites to tribute and did not utterly drive them out. Now who are these that did this?
Ephraim.
Neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites that dwelt in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwelt in Gezer among them. Neither did Zebulun, now that we just read that in Isaiah chapter 9, drive out the inhabitants of Kitron, nor the inhabitants of Nethal, but the Canaanites dwelt among them and became tributaries. Neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Echo, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of, how do you pronounce that? Ahab, nor of Akzib, nor of Hilbab, nor of Aphink, nor of Rehob. But the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out the inhabitants of Bethshemesh, nor the inhabitants of Bethanath, but he dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Bethshemesh and of Bethanath became tributaries unto them. These are the results of what eventually would lead the Assyrian power in 723 BC. The first place that the Assyrians conquered were these lists of nations, the tribes that were in the north, Zebulun and Naphtali. And so Isaiah reflects that the people who sat in darkness have received a great light. These stories are telling the same powerful story, that God in His mercy in this earth of sin and woe will have a people that reflect His glory to the world under the worst of circumstances. You can't get much worse than what we've just went through here this evening. From the time of the judges to the time of Jeroboam to the time of the demise of the 10 tribes, when Naphtali and Zebulun are described as the ones of a people who sat in great darkness, it says that in Jesus' day they would see a great light. Now friends, at the end of the world, the ones that sit in darkness that represented in Isaiah, notice in Isaiah 9 now, go to Isaiah 9. Notice who it is that is the one that is able to penetrate the darkness. Notice in all of our reformatory movements, there's always a time of darkness.
Yes.
Right? In Isaiah chapter 9, let's read the rest of that. It's very powerful. Let's notice what it says, verse 3. Verse 2 says, the people that walked in darkness, this is the ones that were in the time of the judges, the ones that were in the time of Jeroboam. All the people of Naphtali and Zebulun that refused to remove the Canaanites from them, and they mingled with the Canaanites. It caused them to sit in darkness. It says, have seen a great light. They that dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined. Remember we read earlier, the God of the Canaanites was the God of death. Mot, the God of death. Jesus gave his ministry, his opening gospel ministry was in the land of Mot, the land where they mingled with the Canaanites, because his own people in Jerusalem wouldn't receive him. in the judgment, when this is all revealed, what do you think the universe will say to those who refuse to receive Jesus in Jerusalem? What will be able to be said?
Nothing can be said.
Thou hast multiplied the nations and not increased the joy. Verse 3. They joy before thee according to the joy in harvest, and as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For they have broken the yoke of his burden, and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the days of Midian. It's referring you to the time of the judges right here. For every battle of warrior, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood. And this shall be with burning, with fuel of fire. Now notice what verse 6 says. For unto us a child is born, for unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. Of the increase of his government and the peace of his peace there shall be no end. This is the testimony of Daniel 2. His is an everlasting kingdom. It's the testimony of Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 9, 10, and 11, and Daniel 12. Upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice, from henceforth even forever, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. This is the close, friends, of the third angel's message. This is where King Jesus comes as Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And he has a church that he wants to be ready for that. And so the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. There's more to say about that, but we'll go on here. I want to get to this part in Ellen White's account of the earlier judges. Here we are. It says that the king of Mesopotamia, the king of Moab, and after them the Philistines and the Canaanites and of Hazor, led by Sisera, and in turn became the oppressors of Israel. Othniel, Shamgar, Ehud, Deborah, and Barak were raised up as deliverers of their people. But again the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian. Heretofore the land of the oppressor had fallen but lightly on the tribes dwelling east of the Jordan, but in the present calamities they were the first to suffer. This also took place in the time of the Assyrian kings when they destroyed the northern tribes. The Amalekites on the south of Canaan, as well as the Midianites on its eastern border, and in the deserts beyond, were still the unrelenting enemies of Israel. Israel's enemies will always be Israel's enemies. They never change. That's why the papacy, Ellen White says, will never change. The latter nation had been nearly destroyed by the Israelites in the days of Moses. She's here talking about the Amalekites. But they had since increased greatly and had become numerous and powerful. They had thirsted for revenge. This is 350 years or so after their encounter with Moses. These people have a long memory, and now they're thirsting for revenge. And now that the protecting hand of God was withdrawn from Israel, the opportunity had come. Don't miss this. When those who think everything is going to be peace and safety, but really behind it, the hand of God has been removed, and they receive the mark of the beast, then they're going to understand for themselves what it really means to be under the power and the hand of the enemy. The papacy has a long memory. And the papacy is looking for its pound of flesh at the end of the world. Just like these fellows here. It says, not alone the tribes east of Jordan, but the whole land suffered from their ravages. The wild, fierce inhabitants of the desert as locusts for multitude. I want you to notice that these the term locust for a multitude is brought into this sacred history. Judges 6 verse 5. They came swarming the land with their flocks and herds. Like a devouring plague, they spread over the country from the river Jordan to the Philistine plain. They came as soon as the harvest began to ripen and remained until the last fruits of the earth had been gathered. Brothers and sisters, there's a harvest at the end of the world. And it's telling us that the enemies of God are going to hang around for the harvest. We're really not matching wits with what the Bible is telling us. We're way behind the 8 ball on what's ahead. They stripped the fields of their increase and robbed and maltreated the inhabitants and then returned to the deserts. Thus the Israelites dwelling in the open country were forced to abandon their homes and to congregate in walled towns, to seek refuge in fortresses, or even to find shelter in caves and rocky fastnesses among the mountains. For 7 years this oppression continued. And then, as the people in their distress gave heed to the Lord's reproofs and confessed their sins, God raised up a helper for them. Now, friends, this is the parable of Adventism. 7 years is the equivalent of 2,520 days. And at the end of Adventism, at the end of the 2,520 days, God raised up a deliverer, William Miller. It fits. Okay?
Amen.
Now, the one that God raised up in this story, though, is Gideon, the parable of Adventism. Gideon was the son of Joash of the tribe of Manasseh. The division to which this family belonged held no leading position. Miller was a deist. He held no leading position. But his house, but the household of Joshua was distinguished for courage and integrity, and so was William Miller. That was his 2 distinguishing marks in his life: his courage and his integrity. As a deist, he was a captain in the War of 1812, and on the battlefield, he showed those 2 principles in his character. Of his brave sons, it is said, each one resembled the children of a king. I don't know about William Miller's sons, but Gideon. All but one had fallen in the struggles against the Midianites, and he had caused his name to be feared by the invaders. To Gideon came the divine call to deliver his people. Did the divine call come to William Miller?
Yes.
Yes.
In his ears it said, go and tell the people. He was engaged at that time in the threshing of wheat. A small quantity of grain had been concealed, and not daring to beat it out on the ordinary threshing floor, he had resorted to a spot near the winepress. That's where Seventh-day Adventists are today. We're near the winepress. The winepress is, in the book of Revelation, it's the winepress of the wrath of God. And we're hiding over here by the winepress, and we're shivering because of the papacy. That's what we're doing. And we got a little wheat we're trying to thresh out. We're barely giving the third angel's messages in undertones, but we don't want to mention the papacy's name, because he's right over there. And we don't want to offend him, do we?
No, you never take our wheat.
Yeah, right.
You
Well,
never take our wheat.
that's what this is telling us.
Yeah.
The Midianites were right there. A small quantity of grain had been concealed. We've concealed the truth.
Amen.
It's concealed.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
And not daring to beat it out on the ordinary threshing floor, he had resorted to a spot near the winepress. For the season of ripe grapes being still far off, little notice was now taken of the vineyards. In other words, Gideon found a place where he wouldn't be noticed. As Gideon labored in secrecy and silence, he wasn't out there as an army terrible with banners,
No.
with a third angel's message above his head. He was operating in secrecy and silence. He sadly pondered upon the condition of Israel and considered how the oppressor's yoke might be broken from off his people. Notice what this is now. This is very powerful. Suddenly, the angel of the Lord appeared and addressed him with the words, Jehovah is with you.